Welcome to Virtual Wednesdays. My name is Francesca D'Alessio, and I'm so glad you could join us tonight. Tonight, we will hear from longtime leaders in campaigns to build a sustainable art world and learn about Bay Area initiatives helping arts organizations meet the challenges of the climate crisis. This program is in collaboration with Art Plus Climate Action, a California based collective uniting nonprofit art spaces, commercial endeavors, art workers, patrons, and artist studios in the fight for environmental justice. To help us introduce tonight's panel, we have the outstanding Claudia Schmuckley, our inaugural curator in charge of contemporary art and programming. Her accolades are parallel to none, so please visit our website to learn more about the amazing exhibitions, the acquisitions, commissions, all the amazing things Claudia has brought to our museum since she joined in 2016, including Uncanny Valley, Being Human in the Age of AI, Judy Chicago, a retrospective, and most recently Wangechi Mutu, I Am Speaking, Are You Listening? It is such an honor to introduce to you Claudia Schmuckley.
Thank you, Fran. I'm delighted to introduce tonight's program co-hosted with Art and Climate Action. Art and Climate Action is a California-based collective founded in 2020 with the goal of uniting nonprofit art spaces, commercial endeavors, artists, art workers, and patrons in the fight for environmental justice. Art and Climate Action helps organizations large and small take account of their carbon output and provide strategic solutions for achieving zero emissions practices. In this context, the De Young Museum is in the process of completing an exhibition audit, making it the first museum in Northern California to investigate its standard practices in view of greater sustainability. As a founding member of Art and Climate Action, I am thrilled that we were able to convene a panel of leading experts in the climate space to guide us through the issues and concerns we have to address if we want to effectively meet the challenges of the climate crisis. They include Lisa P. Jackson. Lisa P. Jackson is Apple's Vice President of Environment, Policy, and Social Initiatives. She oversees Apple's efforts to minimize its impact on the environment by addressing climate change through renewable energy and energy efficiency. She also leads Apple 100 Million Racial Equity and Justice Initiative and is responsible for Apple's education policy programs, its product accessibility work, and its worldwide government affairs function. From 2009 to 2013, Lisa served as administrator of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Appointed by President Barack Obama, she focused on reducing greenhouse gases, protecting air and water quality, preventing exposure to toxic contamination, and expanding outreach to communities on environmental issues. She has also served as Chief of Staff to New Jersey Governor John S. Corzine and as Commissioner of New Jersey's Department of Environmental Protection. Joining her is Sarah Sutton. Sarah Sutton is the CEO of Environment and Culture Partners, a nonprofit accelerating cultural institutions' leadership in climate action. ECP's flagship collaborative projects are the Frankenthaler Climate Initiative, a grant program supporting museums' energy MLS National Leadership Grant researching energy use in museums. Sarah is the cultural sector lead for America is All, a coalition of subnational organizations supporting the Paris Agreement. She is co-author of The Green Museum and author of Environmental Sustainability at Historic Sites and Museums. She has been an advisor for a new sustainability grants program internal to the National Trust for Historic Preservation and is a steering committee member and climate change co-chair for Held in Trust, a special program of the National Endowment for the Humanities and the American Institute for Conservation that is shaping the future of the preventive conservation profession. Haley Mellon is an artist and conservationist based in San Francisco. She founded the Art for Acres not-for-profit in 2018 to support permanent land conservation on behalf of artists and institutions. The initiative has supported 22 million acres of conservation. In addition, Haley supports carbon calculations for museum exhibitions, the De Young being one of them. She also co-founded Conserve.org and the Environmental Council at MoCA, Los Angeles. She studied at UC Berkeley, New York University, and the Whitney Museum Independent Study Program. A recipient of a Rhizome Commission from the New Museum in New York, Haley exhibits internationally, with recent exhibitions at Alexander Berggruen, New York, MoMA PS1 in New York, and Bischof's Projects in Germany, as well as at the Museum of Dont Denens in Belgium and the Museo Pino Pascali in Italy. They are joined by Jessica Silverman, who is the founder of the internationally renowned San Francisco-based gallery bearing her name, representing prominent Californian and international artists at all stages of their careers. She holds an MA in curatorial practice from San Francisco's California College of the Arts and a BFA from Otis College in Los Angeles. Jessica sat on the San Francisco Arts Commission for 9 years. She's also a founding member of 8 Bridges, a member of the Art Dealers Association of America, and a member of the selection committee of Expo Chicago. Hers is the first gallery in the Bay Area to have conducted an exhibition carbon audit with the assistance of Art and Climate Action. Mickey Meng co-founded San Francisco-based Friends Indeed Gallery with Eric Lee and Nazli Erkan. For the past 15 years, Mickey has worked as a cultural producer, facilitating experimental art projects from ideation to launch across major cities such as San Francisco, Los Angeles, Shanghai, and a partnership initiative that brings together the Bay Area arts community, and is a co-founder of Art and Climate Action. Their conversation is moderated by Jody Roberts, an independent curator and also co-founder of Art and Climate Action. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to you, Jody. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Jody Roberts. I am a co-founder of Art and Climate Action, and I first want to extend a big thank you to the DeYoung Museum, especially Maria, Fran, Rich, and Claudia for the invitation to be here today. We have a lot to cover, so let's just dive right in. I'd love to start with Sarah Sutton. Sarah, could you tell us a little bit about your organization, Environment and Culture Partners? I know you work with a wide range of cultural organizations, but how did you get started with the art sector in particular?
Well, I'm the newbie of all of the folks who are here. I've been in the museum sector for 30 years and just the last 2 for arts work. So, and I got started with Frankenthaler Climate Initiative. So Environment and Culture Partners is a nonprofit that accelerates environmental leadership in the cultural sector. And we had the great good fortune to 2 years ago start working with the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation and the Rocky Mountain Institute to give away money to visual arts institutions who are doing clean energy and energy efficiency projects. And I won't spend too long on it, but some of you in the audience might be awfully interested in this project. And the DeYoung is a recipient of the first year of grants we made just in the last year. The funders wanted to give away $5 million for green energy and energy efficiency projects over 2 to 3 years. And last year, the first year of the initiative, $7 million worth of grant applications came in. And so they made awards to 79 institutions for $5 million. And we're so impressed with the capacity, the reach, the quality of these applications that they doubled the gift with another $5 million over the next 2 years. So those of you who are visual arts institutions, whether you're collecting institutions or exhibiting institutions or art schools, are now eligible for the Frankenthaler Climate Initiative, which is the thing that I've spent the most time in my arts history with the cultural sector, and is one of the projects I'm most proud of because it's the largest private granting program to arts institutions doing climate work. And it's something I hope that we have more of. But there are a couple other projects going on that I want to share with you. And one of them is the Culture Over Carbon project, which is a grant from the Institute for Museum and Library Services to the New England Museum Association that Environment and Culture Partners helps organize. And we work with New Buildings Institute in order to do an energy assessment of the use across all types of museums, zoos, gardens, museums, historic sites, whether it's art museums, natural history, science centers, what kind of energy they use and how they use it. And we're going to establish for the first time ever an energy footprint, a carbon footprint from energy emissions for the cultural sector, so that we have a number that we can work against reducing. So the next time President Biden says what our nationally determined contribution is going to be, we have a cultural sector component of that, and we're working on reducing that amount, which means that we have leverage for asking state, local, federal government, and private funders to help us bring that number down by investing in clean energy and energy efficiency work that we do at art museums. Now, I focus a lot on carbon. Obviously, this group is so focused on that as well, and I think it's really critical for our sector to do. But without, may I say, superpowers like Haley Mellon doing this work and helping us think about how to make this happen, we wouldn't be making as much progress as we are now. We're a little slow to the game, and we have a number of tools that we're using in order to do this work. But we need more tools, and we need more groups like your alliance in order to think about how to deploy those well with all of the folks in our sector and related to our sector that are so motivated to do this work. So this is another tool that's available. It's called Stitch, which is Sustainability Tools in Cultural Heritage. And in the intro, they mentioned that this is one of the projects that I'm part of, that the National Endowment for the Humanities is helping support this life cycle assessment research project and a carbon calculator approach that gives us more tools for doing this carbon work. I know all of us come to our arts and culture programs with interest in the content and the method of sharing the information, but we don't necessarily come with the background in environment and climate and in carbon footprint measurement. So those of us who are so committed and interested in it, when we get together in meetings like this in order to develop and share resources, that accelerates the whole sector together. It helps us move farther, faster. That's the sort of thing that I'm mostly committed to doing now with environment and culture partners as much as we are able to. Because I see that the cultural sector, it's green infrastructure. We've got 35,000 institutions across the United States that are ways to do this climate work, have climate conversations, take care of our own house and reduce impacts while helping our communities be more sustainable, lower impact, and more resilient. And I see that all of us have a role to play in it, and we can do it through our organizations in our communities. And so one of the things I focus on most is making sure that all of the institutions and our allies understand that what our impacts are, how to measure and understand those impacts, and then how to start reducing them. We are one of the most trusted and accessible resources for having these kinds of conversations and doing this work. And so when all of us get together, like in a gathering like this, we can really make a big difference. And so I'm delighted to have been here, to be here with you today and have this kind of conversation and see this good work happen.
Thank you. We were thrilled that you were able to join us. They were willing to join us today, in no small part because your organization is helping so many nonprofit cultural institutions really take a first step in learning about their impact on the climate and then working toward more sustainable practices. Lisa, I would like to ask you a couple questions as someone who has this incredibly long, rich history in the public sphere, and now coming from a major tech company that has set very ambitious sustainability goals. As Sarah mentioned, arts institutions have been slow to make the changes that we all need to make in terms of climate sustainability. And I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about models that we might look to in other industries for moving efficiently, but also quickly along the path that we need to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jody. Look, first, I just want to be really clear. It may feel like you're slow getting started, but that is not going to determine where you end up. And some of the best solutions that we have are ones that actually skip over technologies and move directly to clean energy. So especially for newer institutions or institutions that are in the middle of thinking through major changes, maybe because of the pandemic, maybe just because of where they are. All of those are opportunities to make big changes relatively quickly. So first, be encouraged by the fact that you're taking up this mantle. It's a global environmental challenge. And so by definition, everybody has to be at this table. It's less a question of being first or even being a leader at this point, and really honing in, I think, on what is art's unique contribution. So clean energy, water efficiency, all the things that we think about when we think about climate change can seem intimidating, but I think one of the things the rest of the world looks at when it comes to art and culture is to be a reflection of all of us. And so everyone on this panel, everyone who's in this sphere needs to think about how to genuinely connect this work to the work of your institution, to the work of your employees, because I think you'll develop your own calls to action. You'll find a way to move forward. In terms of industries, every sector is different. I'm going to point to Apple. I know it well, and I'm going to say that we've been working in this area for a long time. You would think technology, tons of engineers and scientists, but it really didn't take off until we sat and focused and simplified and said, okay, where can we make the biggest changes? The quickest, yes, but where can we all rally? And so, of course, we focus on clean energy, but we also focus on reusable materials, recycling, really cutting down on our footprint around plastics, and essentially phasing out of plastics and packaging, and really moving towards recycled materials more and more. And so this idea of identify the key areas where you can have the greatest impact, and then work to grow with the expertise that Sarah and others are bringing into your field, but to further your work in those spaces. And I think you'll wake up and sort of be amazed at how quickly that can spread.
Amazing. Thank you. I appreciate the optimism and the guidance in terms of thinking about how to make those steps. I wanted to ask you another question as someone who's working in a slightly different field, The conversations Art and Climate Action as a group has been having with our colleagues in various arts institutions, it's become abundantly clear that there's so much energy among artists, among the employees of arts organizations to reduce their carbon emissions, reduce their material waste. But sometimes it's hard to break old habits. What are you seeing in terms of employees taking steps to advocate for institution-wide climate responsibility? Is there something we can learn from other larger institutions that are in the same boat?
Yeah, I think in general, those are alliances. Those are allies and friendly, constructive criticism most of the time. I mean, all of us sometimes look at critics, especially when they're internal, and say, oh, come on, you see, I'm working here. But I think I've had some moments with my own team where they've been the ones pushing that we can do more. And I think employees today, come to their workplace and expect to have not just a voice in what's happening, but expect to be engaged in it. So engage them. Turn it around and say, okay, you want us to work on this, help us to ensure that we're working on the things that really matter. Some of the best ideas we've gotten at Apple come from our folks in the retail world who are on the front line and see how our users or customers who are coming into the stores react to our product, or react to features, or react to packaging, or react to the trade-in program. Can I recycle my device? How do I feel about it? So I really think it's really a matter of looking at that tremendous amount of energy. And yeah, sometimes it shows up as advocacy. There's tons of advocacy going on, but advocacy with work, with intention, with purpose, with some leadership, with some amount of resources. At Apple, we have software engineers, we have accountants who come and find ways to be part of our carbon journey. I'll never forget when, the treasurer of the company walked in and said, we should do green bonds. And I didn't think of that because I would never have. And so you'll be surprised. What's really important, though, is the message has to be enforced and reinforced by leadership, that you really want to empower and try to find some transformative solutions and do things different and really question whether this is the way we've always done it answer is really appropriate in the moment that we're in for our planet.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned earlier sort of sitting down on these leadership meetings or larger meetings to look strategically at how you could have the most effect. From your incredible history working with the EPA, now with Apple, I'd like to ask you if there are a couple of areas in which you think the arts world can focus their energy that we know are high impact, that we know are going to make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously, energy is a big term for the arts world as I experience it. Logistics is everything. It's a huge piece of the puzzle for everything from a gallery to a collector, but of course, to an exhibition, thinking through logistics, starting to price the impact in terms of carbon emissions into the cost of putting on the show or putting on the exhibit, and looking for opportunities for people who have traditionally been sponsors of your work, if you're a nonprofit, obviously, to really be a part of this solutioneering and taking up this banner. I think you will find some real energy and interest around that. And even on the for-profit sector, we're seeing more and more folks who are coming into the sector looking to invest in high quality projects and projects that can make money. A couple of things, clean energy is cheaper if you take away all the bureaucracy that protects legacy, dirty forms of energy. And so finding ways to access or to make clear your preference for clean energy where you can is really important. If you're not lucky enough to live in a state like California, obviously, where we can make clean energy choices, but we should be making our voice heard there. The second is on materials. I mean, if I look at its energy, logistics, and then of course materials, and reuse of materials has a huge impact on your carbon footprint whenever possible, and moving to reuse and reduce the amount of material that you have, I think is tremendously important as well. The last one, maybe I'll say for later because I want to hear from these amazing panelists, but this fight, as we are seeing it unfold today, is about Indigenous people, is about people of color who are on the front lines of trying to preserve some of the last remaining biodiversity and places on our planet that can actually sequester carbon. And so the work of lifting up those voices, the work of featuring those voices to the kind of folks who need to hear them is also extraordinarily important. And I would put it right up there with the more operational side of the work that the community has to do.
Yeah, we will definitely come back to that topic. And it leads perfectly into talking to Haley Mellon. You mentioned, let's think about the price in carbon as well as the price in dollars of putting an exhibition together. Haley, you've been doing this type of work forever. For those of you who don't know, Haley is an artist. She's an arts educator, and she's also built a career in the arena of permanent land conservation. Haley, will you tell us a little bit about your work?
There we go. Thank you, Jody, for this nice welcome. And thank you to Sarah and Lisa for agreeing to join on. They're both major heroes of mine and sheroes of mine. And so this is a big day for all of us. I think in listening to Sarah and listening to Lisa's words, community and alliance, a sort of cooperative alliance, came out the most to me. And that's really what I've been putting my time into, is how do you form, build, awareness, how do you beckon capacity to come forward within the arts sector? And it's just very important to have groups like Art and Climate Action that come together weekly, have conversations, support the industry in making shifts, look at things like where is your energy source coming from, et cetera. So I thought I'd use some visual time right now to show some different sites so we could share some different URLs, and I can talk about my work at the same time. Let's see if we get this. Nope. Let's try again. Here we are. Okay, so over the last couple of years as an artist, I've been putting my time into largely into land conservation. And when I have some time left over, I've been working on cooperation within the sector. And so together, a number of different initiatives that formed up over the last about 18 months created something called PACT, which is really just showing that the different initiatives in the arts that are focused on institutional sustainability share the same goals, which is really a continuous greenhouse gas emissions reduction, transitioning to a zero waste sector, and unifying like learning in a space that's intersectional, diverse, and really open to new practices in new ways. So the nonprofit that I founded, Art to Acres, is a member, as is Art and Climate Action, the group that's hosting this talk. Art Switch is a fantastic organization based in New York and Amsterdam. Art to Zero is based in New York and works with supporting institutional shifts. Galleries Commit, Gallery Climate Coalition, and lastly, Key Culture. So I think that just shows that in the last, since the sort of beginning of COVID, there's been a lot of growth. And one of those sort of focuses is on an organization called Artists Commit. And for the artists listening today, I highly recommend you join. We founded this earlier this year. And it's really just starting by taking a step forward and making a commitment. So you can sort of sign up and engage. Another new initiative is Art and Climate Action, which is for California arts workers. And as Claudia mentioned, and essentially this group is something that's very inclusive. We meet on Fridays, and please come join us. I also worked on co-founding the Environmental Council at MoCA, which Lisa is an advisor to. And the purpose of this council is to start shifting the arts museum sectors into having some sort of green team, sustainability sector, but also to create funds to support pivotal climate related or environmental justice related exhibitions and programming. So this is in its second year now. And then lastly, I put quite a lot of time into the nonprofit that I founded, Art to Acres, which works on supporting the arts community in largely in supporting like high impact Indigenous led conservation. So there's a slight website here, should you like to look.
Thank you, Haley. I would love to hear from you a little bit about how you see your work as an artist and your work in your environmental work, shall I say. How do you see those two things complementing each other?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, for me, arts has to do with legacy, it has to do with artifact, and it has to do with what we leave behind. And so land conservation as well engages those factors of legacy, artifact, and frankly, time. So I think I like the connections of this thing of what are we leaving after we're no longer here. And I think that those two sectors understand each other well. And yet it's interesting because when you're looking at an artwork, you're looking really at the accumulation of culture into like one physical piece, history of conversations, history of development into an artifact form. And when you're in a very wild place, you're also looking at the development of a non-human artifact space that has concretized over millennia. So that is fascinating to me. From the conservation work, Art to Acres tends to work with artists who want to donate a small square, a drawing, a painting, and then it goes to support land conservation. It goes to support largely land designation, which is, as Lisa was saying, like the most important work to focus on, which is the sort of indigenous-led projects that usually have 10 to 30 years of request, and wherein the individuals are declaring their own land stewardship, their own land rights, and finding justice in that space. That was largely not attributed in the past. So a collector recently donated this small 8-inch print, and it went to support the conservation of about 1,100 acres into a new regional park. And then a Danish Schutz painting came forward recently that supported the conservation of this location, which is in Peru. It's the first time in Loreto, Peru, that the indigenous reserve law was used, which is higher level of law than a national park. These are some very early crude photos because the project just finished up, but it gives you a sense as to the location. It's about 3 million acres, and it's sort of right on the edge of Brazil. So very exciting projects, but also really wonderful to engage the use of laws that have been in existence. This other project just finished up about a couple months ago, which was about 3 million acres of dry forest, the last large dry forest remaining in South America, unpreserved. And this has 258 families living on it. And Bolivia decentralized their conservation mechanisms to municipalities. And so for the first time, the municipalities were able to support the conservation of their landscapes. And so this municipality wanted to move forward, and this was conserved through indigenous leadership, direction, and decision-making.
It's really tremendous. And to think that the arts are, people who are lovers and supporters of the arts are contributing directly to this work is incredibly satisfying to know. As Haley started her presentation with, there is this growing community of arts professionals who are very invested in shifting our sector. And sometimes those happen in big meetings. Sometimes they happen in small spaces like galleries, exhibition spaces. Jessica, I wanted to turn to you and your gallery. We had the opportunity to work with you directly on a carbon audit of an exhibition. But I'd love to hear the sort of behind the scenes conversations you're having with the artists you represent about sustainability and about what direction they'd like to see this go.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Well, I wasn't planning to start here, but I was thinking as Lisa and then Haley spoke about Indigenous cultures, about one of our artists, Rose B. Simpson, who's Native American and lives on the Santa Clara Pueblo. Her mother actually leads a permaculture kind of group right outside of Rose's studio. Actually, they share the same building. And so these concerns are highly important in Rose's practice and reflected in a lot of the work she and I are doing to create more space for people in her community to exhibit outside of the community and to have more resources to make their work. But it has become, just in general, the conscientiousness around our need to kind of think about how artists operate in their studio, whether it be from shifting the materials they work in to the packaging of the work and the materials they use to the way they ship things to us, are often top of mind when we're organizing exhibitions. And the artist we're showing right now, Hayal Pasanti, is someone who has been very deeply digging into how she can kind of take these concerns much more seriously, and has shifted her materials fully to like organic, non-toxic pastels. And so, you know, just totally shifting her materials. She's really focused right now on minimizing use of plastic and petrochemical substances in the studio. She uses a lot of objects in nature and actually has shifted to using her hands to paint completely. And so she doesn't even buy brushes anymore. to someone like Margot Wolowick, whose work has made textiles on a loom, and her recent series called Storm Systems really kind of are constructed really from amalgamations of forecast graphics and texts that kind of talk about these recent catastrophic storms and their aftermath as a way for us standing in front of the work with collectors to kind of need to speak about these concerns more publicly when we're standing at an art fair. Upcoming, lastly, is Andrea Bowers, who's going to have a show with us in March, who is hugely engaged in environmental activism. Back in 2011, she was actually arrested for tree sitting and videotaped the experience in a piece called "I Plan to Stay a Believer." And actually, our upcoming exhibition, I just spoke about it with her for about an hour today. It's going to have a new film that she made when spending time up north with the Redwood Forest Defense Group. And so her exhibition will kind of deeply engage with a lot of important concerns that the larger community needs to be aware of. She also uses a lot of recycled materials in her work, in her cardboard pieces as well. So that's just like a very kind of short. Haley also knows another artist we work with a lot, Sean Raspet, who's also deeply engaged with a lot of these concerns. And these are things that are just happening naturally for our artists, and their engagement in needing to take better care of the world around them is reflected in the way they are operating, even with Hayal, who's been asked to make NFTs and has kind of declined for the concerns around the environmental issues. So these are really top of mind conversations that we're having on a daily basis with our artists.
And you've also had conversations, I know, with your staff about saying we're going to take responsibility for that, carbon price of an exhibition.
Yeah.
How did they react? I mean, as a former museum worker, I know we're all stretched very thin.
Totally. Well, I think you guys might know Julie Gear, who works for me, who came over from Minnesota Street Projects, and they are someone who really has taken over a lot of the registrarial and shipping management in the company. And we speak about, and also having the new gallery with a new storage room, we're actually able to reuse materials a lot more than we used to, because we actually didn't have a lot of place to store the materials previously, which was a problem. So, just last week when Julie and I were speaking, we were talking about with our other new registrar, Delaney, who just joined us, trying to resource items with less of a carbon footprint, whether that be like locally based items or objects that don't require traveling long distances. When we're shipping, we're constantly trying to utilize items that are compostable instead of polyethylene based products. And we've been kind of talking a little bit about transporting in electric vehicles to kind of offset some shipping costs. We haven't had like tremendous success with that, just because the shipping companies don't typically offer that. And then something that has been like company-wide is to consolidate shipments, just so we're shipping less. So New York to San Francisco to LA, the shipments we do a lot. It really requires us to communicate in advance with our artists, and for our artists to be active participants in meeting deadlines that suit the shipping need, which doesn't always align with the proximity to making the work like 1 week before the show. And so it's not always possible, but it really is important to us to really think about these things and have staff meetings where we talk about how to facilitate that. So just a few insights.
Yeah, a little planning definitely goes a long way.
Exactly.
In terms of having options, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and going back to what Lisa said, I mean, about breaking habits and taking responsibility, I think that is, it's just very easy to like rest on your laurels and make bad decisions and order things off Uline, which is problematic for many reasons. And so we really are trying to be sort of like catch ourselves and like take a pause. Okay, how can we rethink this? What would make more sense? Can we be patient for this shipment? Do we need it now? I mean, these are just the constant kind of questions we're asking ourselves.
Mickey, I wanted to ask you really quickly about an exciting initiative you have started and got coming up working with Haley called A Cool Million, just in thinking of sort of innovative ways that the arts sector can engage with artists and not raise awareness. I think we're all very aware right now of the climate crisis, but bringing museums especially into that conversation.
Yeah, so Cool Million is a special initiative of Art and Climate Action. It's a two-pronged goal. The first aim is to conserve at least 1 million acres of land that addresses California's hydrological cycle. And the second actually is an awareness campaign. I think that we live in this incredible time where activism has become a pop cultural value. So we hope that this public campaign will be able to impact the public. So what A Cool Million is it's a partnership between at least 10 museums along California, and we're partnering these museums with artists, and the messaging would be one of environmental justice. For this project, we're partnering with Four Freedoms, which is an artist-led organization that models civic engagement and direct action. It'll launch during Earth Month of this year, so in April, and generously supported from an initial grant from the Pritzker. So the idea is just to galvanize and to inspire institutions to have more programming around that shapes our conversation to come. So it's definitely an era of hard work, but it's great to be working alongside many people who care, and who can at least look to each other to find solutions, and to kind of be on board with a lot of these people is very exciting.
Thank you for that. April is going to be an exciting month, no doubt. Mickey is also the originator of Art and Climate Action. As we all woke up to orange skies in 2020, we got an email that seemed to cover the entire art world of California, basically saying, what are we going to do? And out of that, a core group of members in the Bay Area have coalesced around Art and Climate Action. And I wanted to reach out to you, Sarah, as someone who has an overarching view of what's going on in the United States. What kind of role do you think these regional organizations can play?
Well, we use the term global climate change in a way that is not to our advantage. It's a big global problem, as if it's somebody else's or something that's too much for us to tackle. But climate change is experienced locally and individually. And that might be different from one region to the next, one locality, one country, one individual to the next. And that's where place-based organizations and groups are most valuable, because it's a shared experience in that location. We need local knowledge, understanding, participation in developing the solution. And the solution will be so specific to that location. In Tacoma, Washington, I don't have the same wildfire experience that the eastern part of Washington does, or certainly that California does. So my contribution to that is not useful at all. But the people who are experiencing it, those are the ones who understand it best and can solve the problem most effectively.
Just to wrap things up, I wanted to return to Lisa and this question of how the arts can contribute to a bigger conversation of climate and the operational changes that need to be made, but also environmental justice and a larger like shift in mentality that we need to make. What is it when you think about the visual arts or the arts in general that excites you in this conversation?
Oh, well, I mean, the obvious, which is that culture, I mean, just what Nikki said, that in this moment, activism is part of culture, and art is reflecting and actually leads culture in many ways. There needs to be a fearlessness about this moment in terms of, you all tell us what's cool. Let's just face it. I'm outside of your world. I'm afraid to not be cool because I want to understand where culture is going. And maybe that's a little strong. So tell me, the people, the collectors that you work with, the institutions that you work with will tell you you cannot do it and you must not do it. But Haley and Jessica and Nikki, y'all are showing us that it can be done, that you can speak that truth to power, that you can tell your collectors that the way of doing business that you're going to insist on also insist on being mindful of the impact that they're having to the planet. It is really just that simple. And every sector is having that same sort of conversation, whether it's the financial sector or the energy sector. Everyone is saying, what am I doing in this moment to deal with this crisis? And so, you know what? You all are the conversation. For many of us in this moment, we saw the same thing at Apple, where people, they love to hear about what we're doing operationally, but what they really say is, tell me how I can do what I want. 80% of Americans say climate change is a problem and they know it's going to be a problem. Less than 10% know what to do about it. Tell them what to do. Tell them what to do and insist they do it.
I would love to, one of our questions that we have coming in is about, other than buying offsets, what can we do about air travel? But I'd like to broaden that up and ask Haley, other than offsetting once you've already done the damage, how do you learn to understand which parts of your operations are contributing most to emissions, and what do you do with that information once you get it?
Yeah, of course. I think echoing what Lisa was just talking about, which is this openness to learning and an excitement for learning, that's sort of the base. And once you are in that space, I think that shifting can actually happen pretty quickly. In terms of learning, I always tend to learn with metrics. I like numbers. And so a few years ago, I started doing like pro bono carbon audits for institutions. And it was really exciting because each time it was like the first, like the Hirshhorn wanted to do the first traveling exhibition, or PS1 really wanted to engage every aspect, like from the wall vinyl, et cetera. And so I think the first thing is you want to engage, like, what is your carbon footprint? And there's a great calculator on the Gallery Climate Coalition page. And that calculator allows you to calculate your emissions and sort of also save them. So you can like revisit them. Here's the calculator itself. And so you can put in things like your travel, your flights, and save a template for an exhibition or for your institution for the year. And then they also came up with a great term. Instead of offsetting, they came up with a term of strategic climate funds, because offsetting tends to be a retail byproduct. And there was interest in really giving to nonprofits and supporting the vertical shift of the industry. Like, how do we shift our space? So I recommend reading this SCF page. It's really, really a great page. And they sort of go through different organizations you can donate to in lieu of offsets. And in terms of a calculation, like this is what I'm working on right now, that's for the ICA Miami. And they just came forward and they were quite excited about looking at what their footprint is. And we do that, ACA does that for institutions in California, for galleries, for schools. So should you have the desire to have like an initial audit done or calculation done for an exhibition, or for example, your energy, your scope 1, scope 2 carbon, we are totally in service and ready to rumble.
Yes, absolutely. For those of you who would like to learn about Art and Climate Action's approach to both calculating carbon emissions and then what to do after it, specifically in California. Our website is artandclimateaction.org. We will also have information there about a cool million, more information about that coming early in this year. We have one more question. It says, Lisa brought up an interesting point about Apple's consumer feedback. Do those in the museum gallery sector think that visitor collector feedback can be included in making sustainable decisions? Jessica, what do you think?
Can you just repeat the second half of it again, the consumer part? Oh, you're muted, Jody.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Do you think that those in the museum or gallery sector can take on visitor or collector feedback as they're making decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can and we should, but I think like Lisa said previously, it's also up to us as to how we communicate that the consideration of being mindful about what's happening on the planet is just part of our business. And so we have to kind of teach them a little bit in terms of being patient for their artwork, because we're going to consolidate it on a truck, for instance, and we're not just going to get them a direct quote as quickly as possible on a shuttle that's going straight to them. So I think we can listen, but we can also give them our ideas and try to have more of a conversation.
Thank you so much for that. I know we're out of time. I'm sure there's a lot more questions, but I want to send out an enormous thanks to all of you for being here. Hopefully, a year from now, we're having these conversations again and feeling very proud of the progress we're making. Thank you all and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much to all of our featured panelists and our extraordinary moderator, Jody Roberts, for such an in-depth and informative discussion. For additional resources and information, please visit artandclimateaction.org. And of course, our museums are open. Please book your tickets online, famsf.org, and we hope to see you next week.